Kia ora everybody, and welcome back to term 2 after our 2-week holiday. I hope you're all well and that you are staying safe in your bubbles. We are looking forward to a couple of weeks at least of online education at Catholic Cathedral College. And so what I've done is I've put together this video which might help us overcome some of those obstacles of the online learning at CCC, because it is new. And it can be quite scary, but it is also quite exciting as well. So what I'm going to cover in this video is some ideas or some tips on how to maximise, get the most out of this online learning time. I also want to give you a little bit of a guide as to how to use some of those applications like Zoom or Teams that your teachers might be using to teach you. And I actually want to go over a little bit of the etiquette or some of the good behaviour that we can show during those online meetings as well. So the first thing I want to cover in this video is just some tips on how to get the most out of these 2 weeks of online learning. And my first tip is make sure you're still following a routine. I know when I go on holiday and I'm away from school, sometimes my routine gets chucked out the window. You might start waking up a little bit later, and we go from working for, say, 6 hours a day to maybe only working a couple of hours a day, or maybe not even doing any schoolwork at all. So my first tip for you is make sure you're still following a routine. Try and wake up at the same time every day. You can set an alarm. You can still set some breaks for yourself as well. You might still want to do your morning tea at 10:30 and do a lunchtime. And another thing that has been talked about is it can be helpful to get ready as if you were going to go to school. So if your morning routine is wake up, jump in the shower and put your school uniform on, you can still do that, and that can be helpful for these couple of weeks where we're away from school. I know that I'll still be waking up at my normal time, as if I was driving into school. I'll still be getting dressed and presenting myself as if I was going to teach a class. So that's my first tip, would be to follow a routine. It might not be the same routine that we have during term time, but a routine can be really helpful. The next tip I've got for you for these 2 weeks of online learning is try and make sure that you've got a dedicated workspace where you're doing all of your schoolwork. So it can be easy for us to lay in bed all day, have your laptop or your Chromebook sitting next to your bed and just do all your schoolwork from there. But the reality is your bed is for sleeping, your kitchen is for cooking food and eating. And so try to avoid attending your online meetings or doing any of your schoolwork in parts of your house that might be dedicated to other jobs. I have a spare bedroom where I usually keep boxes of stuff that I don't need right now. But what I've done is I've cleared it out and made sure that it's a good space for me to sit down and do my schoolwork. So that's my next tip for you, is try and dedicate a workspace around your house to schoolwork. That means when you sit down in your study space or your workspace, it's time to do your work. And then when it's time to go eating, you can go sit at your dining room table. If it's time to watch TV or play PlayStation, you can go to the lounge. And when the day's done, you can head to your bedroom to go to sleep. So try and set up a dedicated workspace to be able to do your schoolwork in. Another tip that I want to pass on for this online learning phase that we're in is make sure you're prepared, okay? So your teachers are going to be putting a lot of work into preparing lessons and preparing work in a new way for you to take on. And it would go a long way to make sure that you're prepared yourselves as well. So what does that mean? Well, it means, update your calendar, your Google Calendar or any calendar that you've got, so that you know which lessons and which classes are going to be meeting at what times. Make sure you know what class is coming up. If there's any homework, then make sure you've got that homework done so that you can attend your online meetings in a prepared way. Okay, if that means setting alarms, then do that. I use my phone all the time to set alarms when I've got meetings and things coming up. And it means that you can Maybe you've got some questions that you're unsure of, maybe you're struggling with something, so that when you attend those meetings, you know that you can ask your teacher to make sure that you're clarifying things with your teacher, okay? So make sure that you're prepared. And the last tip that I want to give you before we move on is don't panic, don't freak out. This is new for everyone. We're all doing this for the first time, teachers and staff and students all together, and we'll make sure that we get through it together as well. So, if you do end up missing a teaching episode, remember that it's likely that that'll be uploaded onto the internet for you to watch later on. If you are struggling with your Zoom or your Meets or your Teams or anything like that, just remember that there's probably a whole lot of people going through those same issues as well. All problems are fixable, and your teachers are always available via email as well, so you're able to get in contact with them anytime you need anyway. So don't panic. Now I want to move into talking about some of the actual tools that you will be using on your Chromebook or on your laptop or on your phone to make sure that you're keeping up with all of the work that's occurring over this online learning phase. Okay? And there's plenty of them. So I'm just going to talk about some of the main ones that I use to organise myself online, and hopefully that helps you out as well. So the first thing that is good to use is bookmarks. Bookmarks is just like a physical bookmark that you put inside a workbook or a book that you're reading. It's a way for you to easily find a website which is going to be important for you. Okay, so if you're on a website that you know you're going to be using often, you can set it as a bookmark. And the way that I do that when I'm using Google Chrome, so this will be the same for you if you're on a Chromebook, is by clicking on the star icon in the search bar, and that will save it, and then it will appear up on that bookmarks bar. And you're actually able to save bookmarks into folders, so maybe there's one class and you want to save multiple different websites for that class, you can organize those into folders as well. So some important bookmarks that you might want to keep could be your classroom page for your class. Maybe you want to bookmark Gmail because you know that you're going to be checking your emails all the time, and maybe you want to bookmark your Google Drive so that you can easily access that. You don't need to type that website address in every time you want to use it, and some of those other tools that you might be using as well, like Meets or Teams or Zoom, if you know that you're going to be going to that website all the time. Okay, the next tool that you're probably already really familiar with is Google Drive. This is where all of your work's kept. Maybe you're working on particular documents or your slides or whatever it is. It's all kept in your Drive. There's not much that I need to say on this because we're probably already familiar with Drive, but try and keep it as organised as possible. And again, using folders for your classes is one way that I make sure that my Drive is organised. So that would be a piece of advice that I give to you. You can organise it whatever way works best for you, but for me, having folders with all of the work that I'm using for classes easily accessible is one way to make sure that my Drive is nice and organised. The next tool that I wanted to talk about was your Google Calendar, which you all have because you've all got a Gmail address set up by the school. So a good thing to have on your bookmarks bar as well as your calendar. And you can also load that application onto your phone as well. There are so many different functions in Google Calendar that I don't have time to go through all of them. But one thing that's really helpful for me is when you add a particular entry into that calendar. So let's say you've got a meeting tomorrow at 8 o'clock. You can actually set up an alarm for that meeting as well, so that maybe the day before you remember, cool, I've got a meeting at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. You can set up an alarm for 5 minutes before. That notification will pop up onto your phone, and you will know that, okay, sweet, in 5 minutes time I've got to be ready to go for my science class, and I know that because my phone's told me that. So calendar is definitely something that you should be using to make sure that you're nice and organised and to make sure that you're following that routine that you've set up for yourself. The last thing that I wanted to touch on, the last tool to talk about is these online virtual meetings that will be set up by your teachers. Each teacher is going to be running face-to-face sessions. Some of these will be where a lot of the learning happens. Maybe your teacher is going to be delivering lots of content. Other teachers might be running meetings where you're just checking in and getting feedback from your teacher, and that might be done on an application called Meets or Teams or Zoom, or maybe there are other applications that teachers will be using. There's different ones, okay? The best advice that I can give to you when you're using these meetings, meeting tools, is be curious, okay? So if you log in and you're not sure what to do, if you haven't used it before, just take the time to be a little bit curious, find out what settings you can use, find out what are the different functions of that tool. And also, if you're using a Chromebook, like I am, then you'll be using Google Chrome as your internet browser as well. And so there are extensions that you can use as well. So that will just make it easier to be able to log in. And also, there might be different functions that you can use through those extensions. The best person to ask about how to use these tools is going to be your teacher, because your teacher has put the time into making sure they're prepared and so that they're able to use these tools really effectively. And so if you are unsure about how to use a particular tool, make sure you're asking your teacher. And again, don't panic if it's not working. Just remember that you will be able to catch up later on, and maybe that meeting will be recorded and put online for you to watch later on. So if you do, if you are using these tools, again, be curious, go in with an open mind, and also make sure you're asking your teacher when you're using these tools as well. Okay, now that we've talked about tools that we can use to make sure that we're nice and organised during this online learning phase, I just wanted to finish by talking about a few points of etiquette and behaviour that we can follow when we're attending these online meetings, because it is new and we might not know exactly how to behave when we're doing these online teaching episodes. Okay, the first one is make sure you're presented well. All right, the reality is that if you've got an early online meeting, you might have just rolled out of bed, and that's how things happen now that we're working from home. But make sure that you're dressed out nice, okay? That you're not in your pajamas, okay? It's just like a traditional classroom, all right? We want to make sure that our uniform's nice when we're walking into school, and so when we're attending these meetings, make sure that we are at least decent, okay? And probably not the best thing to be attending this meeting from your bed, okay? Make sure that you're presenting well to these online meetings. Next, point of etiquette that I need to tell you before we move on to this, when moving into these virtual meetings, is making sure you're on time. Okay, so respect the fact that your teacher has put aside their time. Maybe they're away from their family at that time. Maybe they've got other jobs to do, and they've put aside their time to make sure they're able to meet with you. And so respect that and follow your routine. Okay, we'll all have routines that we're following, and give yourself the best opportunity to succeed. Okay, so don't be late. In fact, if it was me, I would make sure that I was a little bit early, because I can make sure that all of my technology is working. I can make sure that if the teacher's there early, that I can maybe ask a couple of questions before we get into the lesson. Make sure that you're on time to your virtual meetings. Just like a traditional classroom. We don't want to show up late in the morning. We don't want to show up late to our classes, and we don't want to show up late to our virtual meetings too. The last point of behaviour or etiquette before moving into these online meetings is, make sure you're not distracting yourself, and make sure you're not distracting other people as well. So this is part of having a dedicated workspace. You know that you're not going to get annoyed by mum or dad or whoever's around at home. don't have your headphones in listening to music. Don't be talking to the other people that are attending the virtual meeting. It's likely that you'll probably be muted anyway. But again, just like a traditional classroom, make sure that you're not distracting yourself, and make sure that you're not distracting the others as well. Okay, and that's it for this first video. So what I have done is I have put together a document that has all of these tips on it for everyone to look through. And down the bottom of that document, I've got some more YouTube clips for you to watch. They are individual guides for each of the different tools that your teachers might be using. So a guide on how to use your calendar, or how to organize your drive, or how to use Zoom. So if you've got any other sort of questions, watch those videos first, and then you can get in touch with me if you've got some real serious questions about etiquette and behaviour, or questions about the tips, or questions about the individual applications that you might be using during this online learning phase. The big thing to remember is that this is the first time we've tried anything like this. So be patient, make sure you're being curious, and be safe, and don't panic, and just go with the flow. And I'm sure if we can all do that, we will make sure that we get through this together, we get through this well, and it'll be all good. Thank you very much.